I'm very pleased to be here tonight. It is an honor to welcome Professor Casati to NYU Abu Dhabi and to do so on behalf of the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute. Roberto Casati is a philosopher, tenured senior researcher at the CNRS in Paris, and chargé de mission for research and innovation at the French Ministry of Research. I've been knowing Roberto since 1997, and considering his career and his publications, I could easily make this introduction a very, very long one. But one thing I learned from him is to claim, as a designer, the role of a decision and policy maker. So my designer decision today is to make this introduction less than 3 minutes long and then leave the stage and the scenes to Roberto. Before that, I would like to share with you just one example of philosophy for designers. I'm going to talk about presidential elections, no less. Electoral systems are algorithms that transform number of votes into smaller number of seats. In the case of presidential election, it's just one seat. Several procedures exist around the world, and until very recently, in example, in USA, everybody was pretty happy with the system chosen. Now, if you go back in time, in December 2000, in Florida, where the destiny of the presidential election of the United States were decided by a Supreme Court sentence over a voting recount. The question was if and how to recount perforated ballots, but ultimately it was about how to define a whole. Is it a whole when the chad of paper is detached only on one or two sides? Which are the exact criteria that will transform a whole into a proper vote? Can the voter amend the shape of the whole by multiple perforation to make the final whole clearer, or that make the whole not counting as a vote? It was ultimately an ontological question, and all of a sudden an entire nation realized that they did not know what the word whole meant exactly. And it was crucial to find an agreement. And Roberto and Achille Varzi had published a book titled Wholes. And it was really somehow surreal to see them answering a philosophical, ontological question on primetime news on CNN. And I don't know if you remember, it was like, Professor Casati, what is a whole exactly? So to people who think that the domain of philosophy is to solve abstract questions, I ask them to ponder the case of the presidency of the United States going to Al Gore rather than George W. Bush in the year 2000. The history of a powerful nation could have been very different if only we had thought a little bit more about the definition of what a whole is. And if out of those reflections, we had designed more efficient voting systems. That is, to me, a good case of the importance of philosophy for designers. And for more on this topic, it is my privilege to leave the stage to Professor Casati. Thank you.
Now, it's a great honor to be here in this environment, which is full of challenges, I understand. And it's a very nice thing to be here for a particular reason is that design, I move into a book by someone else, just to change slide. Design has been a very long, I would say lifelong love affair for me. I am a philosopher. I published in academic philosophy for many years, but I was trained in parallel as a designer. So I had this education, which gave me a lot of input I was relying on even when I was doing philosophical work. And when I got this invitation to talk about design in a distinguished academic location, I decided to spend really a lot of time pulling together many strings that I've left and pulled for many years. I had many ideas about designs, and eventually I think I came out with a theory which sort of satisfies me. It is very much work in progress, so I would be very happy to get your questions about it. So I'm a philosopher, and philosophers typically today are either very general philosophers or they are philosophers of. So you have many philosophers of respectable non-philosophical disciplines. You have philosophers of science, of physics. You have philosophers of art, aestheticians. Moral philosophers working on morality. And there isn't much about philosophy of design so far. I, of course, scouted the literature, looking for text on the philosophy of design. And one reason, I suppose, for not there being much about philosophy of design is that design itself has a very short history. I'd like to qualify what I'm saying about design having a short history. It is not since long that we have design as an academic, recognized professional disciplines. So I would say that people were designing things all the time for centuries and millennia, but it's only since maybe 70, 80 years where we are talking about design and turning it into an object and, or into a department, something with an army to fight academic battles and professional battles. So this short history span probably motivates a certain absence of theoretical reflection, explicit theoretical reflection about design. There is some. It is simply that you don't find it in philosophical books because there is little which is dubbed philosophy of design. And so you have to start somewhere, and you start probably from history of design, what we know about it, from design practice, or from some intuitions we have about what a designer is doing, as opposed to other professional figures. You can look into the work by, or explicit statements by people who are respected authorities on design. Paolo Antonelli, design curator for the MoMA in New York. You have a statement on this small handout which I gave, which is just a bonus track for extra reflection about design. Statements by respected designers in the profession, Donald Norman, one of the leading figures of design. Visionaries, such as Jason Lanier. Again, you have some statements by him, working in digital environments, so a new frontier of design. Philosophers, explicitly addressing design, Bruno Latour, a French colleague who has a fine paper on design, one of the few that I'd like to quote. Anthropologists, Philippe Descola, another colleague, and there is a statement by him also on the handout, which I find very inspiring. So I'm pulling together all this to try to give an idea to myself, and I hope to you, a militant idea of what design is, and as a philosopher, I would like to find a characterization which satisfies everyone and tries to accommodate some of our intuitions. My personal history, as I said, is a history in which I was trained also by designers. This is a famous Italian designer, very much respected one, Bruno Munari, who made a lot of innovations in Milan in the 70s and 80s. Also bordering on art, so he was making this series of expressive forks, which can make some signs like the ones you make with your hands, probably culturally biased. Also, and this is important for what I'm going to say in a minute, by giving you my punchline, also in the school I attended, there was a teaching by important psychologists, perceptual psychologists. This one is not a very well-known name outside the profession, Gaetano Canizza, but his work on Gestalt psychology has produced some of the most famous illusions, like the Canizza triangle. I think you can you know it, is one of the most famous psychological stimuli in the psychological literature. There is a white triangle here, which is really compelling, but actually physically nothing corresponds to the white triangle. You only have Pac-Man and broken lines. And the white triangle, after a while, looks even whiter than the background, although there is nothing there to make any difference. And you can even see the boundaries of the triangle. So why am I mentioning this? Well, because in that school that I attended, as in many other schools, it was important to have not only practical training, but also theoretical training on many issues which are related to design, such as materials or ways in which objects can survive or not survive, but also training on the workings of the human mind, because it is part of the equation in design that you take into account how the human mind works. And you have to know that in front of a certain pattern, your mind is producing objects which are not there, like the white triangle. So this is part of your knowledge and of your trade. Well, as I said, I want to give you my punchline right away so that you use it as a sort of a beacon for orienting the discussion. There is a general tendency to consider design as a discipline or craftsmanship, which is midway between engineering on the one hand and art on the other hand. So the picture I am trying to fight against is this picture. There is a continuum from engineering through design to art. I am going to respect some of the intuitions which are behind this picture, but I would like to suggest that the picture we have to endorse is slightly different. It's not this one. Why this picture is, why is it a powerful and somehow convincing picture? Well, because it seems to be clear that a designer is doing something more than just engineer a solution. A designer, as an engineer, is solving a problem. You go to a designer with a problem, and you expect the designer to solve that problem. Say the problem of sitting. And maybe you're sitting on a chair which is less expensive than other chairs, made of a lesser number of parts, more beautiful, whatever. But there is a problem to be solved. And the expectation that seems to be addressed to the designer is that the solution be not just an engineering solution. Not any chair will do to qualify as a designer's chair. There has to be a supplement. I would say a soul supplement, or a human factor supplement. Something which takes design somehow closer to art. And this is why, in the traditional picture, you have engineering on one side, adding a little bit of human factor, a little bit of a soul, something artistic, and you get a design object. So my claim is that this is not the correct view. Actually, the correct view is the following, which I, as I said, give you right away, is that the difference between designing and engineering is not just that there is a human factor, because the human factor can be part of the engineering equation. So there is nothing that takes you beyond engineering, problem solving, by just adding the human factor, because you have to take into account the human factor anyway. The supplement is that when you make a new design, when you throw in a new product, or when you design a new process, or a new cooking recipe, or a new thing which is something that you recognize as a designer's endeavor, the difference is that by producing this particular object, you're making a claim. So this is my qualifying statement about design. You're making a claim. You're making a statement, a normative statement. And this normative statement is what we're going to talk about for most of the remaining talk. You're doing something more than just solving a problem. You're telling people that this is the way the problem ought to be solved, or this is a new way to look at the problem, or this is a new way to move beyond the state of the art. The claim may be accepted or not accepted, may be good or bad, but it is a claim. And this is what distinguishes design. It's not that you're going to do a better product, but that you're claiming that you're making a better product. So you're claiming that this chair, which is the Tonnet chair produced at the end of the 19th century and seen in 400 million exemplars, is better than this chair for a number of reasons, which might be factual reasons, which determine the criteria why you choose the chair as opposed to this chair you prefer this chair to the other chair. For instance, it's made of 7 pieces only. You're going to claim that this particular cell phone is better than this cell phone. Maybe it is not true, but this is the claim that you're making. You're claiming that this tube map is better than this tube map. And you're claiming that this recipe of the bechamel sauce is better than this recipe of a bechamel sauce, or the other way around, depending who's the designer here. So one qualifying point is that those claims are, of course, relative claims. There is no such a thing as the absolute tube map, or the perfect chair, or maybe there is the absolute bechamel sauce recipe, but it's hard for me to tell. But I'm pretty sure about the other objects, there is no such thing as the perfect solution. There are always solutions which are better than existing solutions. But the point is not better than, the point is the claim that you're making. I am claiming that my solution is better than our solution. I am claiming that this solution is going to take you somewhere else, in a new area of the design space. So art, design, and engineering are not to be considered as a crescendo or elements on a continuum. There are discontinuities here, and basically there are different dimensions, and the design dimensions take center stage when the normative claim, which I'm going to develop upon, is in place. Another point is that better than should be assessed, is assessed, and it totally depends on the environment in which you're making that particular claim. So this is, again, Bruno Munari, the Italian designer. And this is not a Photoshop. This is a picture of a real chair, which is the chair for short visits. There might be a context in which you want people to sit. I mean, I shouldn't make jokes about a professor receiving students in this particular place, but you might want people to sit for a very limited time span in front of you because your time is limited. And you can make this type of statement. Of course, you'll never make this type of statement, and this is one thing I'm going to develop upon. This is what makes this chair not a design object, but an art object. And there will be subtleties here to be discussed. But anyway, we keep this in mind. There are 3 different coordinates in this space, and the design coordinates is there when you start making that particular type of claim. To repeat, design is solutions plus the essentially normative claim statement. So there is a 4th element in this set, which is science. So I want to get rid of science pretty soon in this talk. Actually, it's one of the things that interests me more, but I think it's relatively easy to accommodate, because this helps us to understand the difference between design, art, and engineering relative to the presence of a human factor. So I'm going to talk about the human factor now. This is a picture by Nadar of Chevreul. Chevreul was the director of the Gobelin tapestry works. The Western contribution to tapestry, which I shouldn't mention in this particular part of the world because there might be a competition here. So he was a scientist and a manager, partly an artist. And at some point in his career, he got a mission, and the mission was people in the works told him that certain juxtaposition of colors really didn't work. So they took some blues, they took some reds, they took some greens, they put them together, And after they were woven together, the color killed each other. Why? We're making those beautiful colors. The dyes are wonderful. They put them next to each other, and the color kill each other. And Chevreul was very systematic and started producing this type of, well, here is better presented, this type of color charts, which are more or less all used to now, and started very systematically to put colors next to each other. He had a suspicion that the problem was not a physical or a chemical problem. It's not that when you wave together colors, they start to interact somehow. It was a perceptual problem that he didn't have any explanation, but he didn't have the facts either. So he started making a list of the facts. And I'm going to show you a couple of interesting pictures. So here, what was a typical Chevreul problem? The people in the works had two pieces of brown cloths, which are absolutely indistinguishable, but put into different contexts. So this brown is absolutely identical to that brown, but in the two different contexts, they look completely different. It is a phenomenon which is today explained by color science in terms of simultaneous contrast. It has a name. There are explanations for this. No matter what the explanation, the facts are important for designers, and designers have to know these facts. I can give you an even stronger case so that we have a little fun. This is one of the most amazing illusions that I know of. It's actually not really an illusion, but is a way to twist your perceptual system into doing things that you do not expect it to do. A picture by a stimulus by Bolotto and others. So it's another kind of fact that we should be aware of when we try to put together colors in different contexts. What you see in these two pictures is actually the same cube. You can check by looking at the distribution of colors, but it is the same cube in two different light environments. So there is a strong yellow light to your left and a strong blue light to your right. What happens here is that you have impression, for instance, that given the presence of the light, this blue is actually identical to that blue. It's the same blue, only on the left-hand side, it is in a yellow light, in the right-hand side, it is in a blue light. But if you go there and use Goffredo's instruments, so Photoshop, you make a sampling of a color in a specific point, and you check which color on the other picture is the same. Or if you put a mask, I show you with the mask. What you're going to discover is relatively surprising, I would say. This was supposed to work. So this blue here, if you measure it, if you sample it and you put it in the right slide, is actually identical to this yellow here. I repeat because some of you are pretending by your face that you did not understand. This blue here, if you cut it out and you replace it in the right-hand part, is actually identical to that yellow here. So they're exactly the same color if you measure them with Photoshop or if you cut them away and put them one next to each other. And I can see that some of you are still as perplexed as the first time. So what I can do for helping you is to put a little mask around those colors. And you discover that it is gray on the left and gray on the right. It's exactly the same. I'm not changing picture. It's just the same picture with the masks on top of them. So I think you can see that it is the same gray now, but if I take it away, you're back to the beginning of the story, and the two colors here, which I point to you for this blue here and this yellow here, now are back to the difference that you already had. So the visual system here is doing something, is calculating the presence of a blue light on the right and the yellow light on the left, and it's actually subtracting the yellow component to the left, to the gray that you see, to give you blue, and is subtracting the blue component to the gray that you have on the right to give you yellow. This is more or less the calculation that it is making, and the result is that you see these two identical spots of gray as actually different. And there are many lessons from this, but one lesson is that you have to take into account this type of facts when you make designs. And you also have to take into account the fact that there are specifics, proprietary systems for calculating colors, which are very hard to influence from top-down knowledge. So you know now that these are the two, exactly the two same, the identical, same but different spots of gray. And you cannot stop seeing them as different. So your knowledge is not influencing you. You have to respect those facts if you are a designer in order to make designs which are convincing. This is yet another case. No Photoshop involved, just the same researcher, Bolotto, who's producing this interesting illusion, but you can try it as an exercise for your next class in perception. So you have to take into account those facts, and I want to, this is the most theoretical slide I'm going to present for tonight. They allow us to say something about creativity and what type of work is done by designers when they try to explore new solutions and come up with new ideas. There are two ways to conceive of creativity. There is what I would call Darwinian creativity, which is the way in which biology works, according to our best theory of biological variety. Darwinian creativity is a way to select solutions out of a process which is extremely wasteful. In Darwinian creativity, there is an engine which generates a huge number of solutions by simply random variation. So you have an engine which generates random solutions, zillions of them. And then all those solutions are subject to tight environmental constraints. My descent can stop by genetic random mutation producing sweat glands. So they would not be able to cool down in a hot environment, and a hot environment is going to impose a filter on my descent and block the reproduction of that part. So there is a tight set of environmental constraints which reduces the solution to a very limited number, and 99 point something of species which have existed on Earth are now extinct because of this type of continuous selection. But the point about the Darwinian creativity is that it is it works actually. It works, but it is very wasteful. You really need a lot of time, millions of years, and you are going to waste a huge number of individuals because you don't care. Simply, you have the time. Human creativity doesn't work like that. Biologists would call it a Lamarckian type of creativity. You already have very many constraints on design space, inside design space, and you do not generate many solutions because you explore design space. So you do not make creativity in recipes, for instance, by throwing together whichever ingredients you have at home and then keeping those recipes which are not rejected by your friends or which do not make your friends reject you. So this is not the way you make innovation in cooking. Innovation in cooking is that you think out a number of constraints. For instance, you have vegetarians at home, many constraints, or price and other constraints, and you're making a certain proposal. And then, well, there is a loose environmental variation which makes a selection. In some cases, it is even random selection. There are so many beautiful novels around. Some of them become blockbusters. Maybe it's just random. There is nothing to do. People are good at making good novels, but some of them really win. So this difference is important because these tight constraints in design space are explored by engineers and designers alike, and they also include the human factor, knowledge of a human mind and the working of a human mind, perceptual system, reasoning system, decision-making system. Okay, this is another summary. Design is different from engineering plus art. Design is different from engineering plus ergonomy, human factor, or engineering with a human face, because the human face is already part of engineering. Mature engineering already includes ergonomy and the human face. And we know it because we have different sources of evaluation for design, for engineering, and for art. Let me say something about another coordinate, another relationship, design and art. Because of course, I want to respect again the intuition that design and art are somehow close. There is a closeness. They're different, but there is a closeness. Well, art is a nebula. It's very hard to characterize art. I do not envy my colleagues who works in philosophy of art. It's a wonderful subject. It's very hard to come up with a definition which satisfies everyone. Functional definitions don't work because art had so many different functions in different civilizations. Art is very moving, and we seem to know at any time what art is, but we lose contact and there is a lot of innovation. It's very hard to find. But there is one element of art which is important here. Not all art includes that element, but that element is important for understanding art, is the performing element. So there are performing arts, and also some arts which are not performing include some performance element. Even drawing has a performance element which is visible also in the final product. So the performing element is what interests me here, because it comes close to the statement-making element in design. And this is why this closeness makes some design can easily flow into art, and some art can easily be retrieved into design. I'm giving an example. This is an example by a San Francisco group named Recherche. So Recherche, they make performances based on institutional design. They made they read the statistics about public ground occupation, public space occupation in San Francisco. 75% of public space in San Francisco is occupied by parking spots. Of course, there are many cars around, so you want to put them somewhere, and you need all this public space for cars. It's a car civilization. And they wanted to make a point about it. They wanted to make a statement. It is partly a design statement, partly a performance in the art sense. The statement is as follows. Well, they go at noon. They went at noon at a parking spot, and they put dimes in the meter. So they rented the space. And then the space was theirs. And they put a bench, trees, grass, real grass, for 2 hours. Police come. You can't stay here. Well, I paid for it. Well, but this is supposed to be for cars. Well, who said it? And a lot of discussion, make a movie, go to YouTube, and a number of things which you can easily imagine. And it's a wonderful statement. It's a political statement. It's an institutional design statement because well, if you are a designer, you may want to do this type of things. Reprogram cities. Make a meter for benches and not for cars, or things like that. But in the specific case, it is art, and it is meant as art. It's not a contribution. It's a contribution to public discussion or design for debate, as Paolo Antonelli says in the handout. But it has all the marks of art because of a performing element. If it was designed, it couldn't stop here. 2 hours are not enough, say. Recherche is making a statement about something which is very interesting, I would say. It's a big taboo in Western societies concerning sleeping in public spaces. There are things you cannot do in public spaces, reproduction, defecation, urination, which I think is reasonable to forbid people from doing. Sleeping. What's wrong with sleeping? I mean, why people can't be allowed to sleep in public spaces? At least in my culture, it's not very likely. It's not very well tolerated. So, or there are designated spaces, some areas of Central Park in certain moment of the day, not always. Italian artist Ugo La Pietra was also taking stance against the sleeping taboo. And the idea is here, well, I have, he called it a commutator thing. It's a foldable structure that you carry around. And when you're tired, you just deploy it and take a nap. Is it a big design statement? I don't know. It looks like a design statement. It is also art in the sense that it is a performance. And of course, you can have an intermingling of design and performance here. This is a beautiful scheme, not the art contribution is easy to spot, but the design contribution is Paris has introduced a scheme for letting bikes go in the opposite way in a one-way street. It's very effective, and it changed a lot of traffic. so forbidden except for bikes, and some artist makes a comment on it. And artists can make a comment as well on the fact that you're using bent wood for making the tonnage share. Well, I have an exploration here to make. I finished the relationship between art and design. I think everyone is satisfied, I hope, with the fact that there are performing elements in design, but design is not only that. You're making statements which are normative statements. Another exploration concerns normativity as such. And here I'm making an example which takes us to a much more dramatic level, which is the example of organ donation and the way in which knowledge of facts about the human mind, the design statements, consequences, and moral consequences in particular are intertwined. Organ donation is a big issue in many countries. One day it will be possible to create, to farm organs. Now it is not possible. The best way to farm an organ is to find it in another body, in a dead body, which provides it. And different countries have different laws for organ donation and different schemes for making people adhere or not to organ donation. Basically, what you want to do is asking people, yes or no, do you want to donate your body for saving someone else's life? So it's a very simple question, it's a yes or no question. You can answer yes, you can answer no. But research in cognitive science shows that the way you ask this question influences the answer in a very dramatic way. So there are two ways in which you can ask this question so that the answer changes. One is the way which is used by countries like United Kingdom, for instance, some US states and others, which is we make a default of you not donating your organs. And we ask you to opt in for organ donation. This is the typical form that you find in, it typically is associated with the driving license because it is expected there are going to be many accidents which are going to unfortunately produce this type of situation. So in this case, you ask people to opt in. If you don't, your organs are not going to be donated. The French system and in other countries, the default is organ donation, and you must explicitly tell the state that you're opting out of organ donation. So you have to, if you don't want to donate your body, your organs, you have to fill in a form and check the appropriate boxes. It is the same question, though. It is just framed into different, but logically speaking, it is the same question, yes or no to organ donation, and the difference is massive. So in those countries in which you have the opt-in, you have rates about 10, 15%. In those countries in which you have the opt-out, rates go up, skyrocket to the ceiling. It is not a completely, we would say, that's very nice. So we should all go for the opt-out option and we'll solve the problem of organ donation. But it is a complex design and political issue because here you're being paternalistic in a sense. There is a big philosophical issue for designers, which is paternalism, making choices in the place of people. People who are choosing to the right or to the left, for that matter, are simply not choosing. Because people is a tendency of the human mind to go for the default. So the default wins. The status quo wins. So if you frame it in such a way that you have the opt-in or the opt-out, you're choosing in the place of people. And this is an important element. So you're making a design statement here which has huge consequences. And you have to think out the consequences philosophically, morally. It's not a trivial choice. Well, you might say, okay, organ donation, huge issue, huge moral issue. People are going to debate it endlessly. Why don't we talk about design of calligraphy, for instance, or of typeface, which is so harmless? Well, I think you can find context in which even calligraphy is going to be an issue. And I will show in my final slide that writing and some choices about designing writings are making exclusion issues. So a very complex calligraphy is there for exclusion purposes, typically. So very few design choices are without consequences, and we have to think through the consequences. And another point, another end point of this provisional discussion is that designers are making normative claims. But normative claim, what does it mean? Is it a good claim? Is it a bad claim? We don't know. There has to be an independent discussion about the moral value of the claim. It is a normative claim in the sense that it purports to make a difference relative to the state of the art. It is somehow beyond the state of the art. It is going to change the way you ought to behave, but is this for the good or for the bad? An independent dimension. Okay, this is the end of my first part. Now there is, I think, a funnier part on technology, because we live in a technological environment. And the technological environment is what designers are supposed to work about most in the next century. And the first citation, the first quote by Jason Lanier here gives you an idea of a complicated landscape. Technology, and there is a lot of philosophy of technology, is interesting here for one specific reason. So I want to make a small exploration of technology. It is not because technology is going to change our lives, or it already has, or that we are going to become cyborgs and things like that, digital natives whatsoever. No, I'm interested only in a very small specific aspect of technology, which is going to matter for the issue of making normative statements, which I take to be designers' main feature. The example that I'm going to give is related to the digital camera and the way the digital camera has changed photography. But not any digital camera. I'm talking about the digital camera that you have in your cell phone. I think you should raise your hand if you have a cell phone which does not have a digital camera. Well, you're going to disappear soon. There are more digital cameras now in cell phones than there are outside cell phones. So for the crossing point was, I think, in 2008, 2009. At some point at the beginning of the 2000s, the telecoms started to negotiate with the producers in order to put digital cameras in cell phones. Why? There is no reason to have a digital camera in a cell phone. But they plan to generate a huge traffic in MMS, multimedia messages. How many of you have sent an MMS as of late? Well, I think you're going to disappear either. How many of you have sent an SMS as of late? Okay. This is what happened. No one used the MMS facility. But at this point, the digital camera was in the cell phone. So, and this is important. Why? Well, before having digital cameras in cell phones, most pictures, unless you were a professional photographer, an amateur photographer, which is a bizarre kind of a journalist, and some other small category, were like that. It's taken from Google. Ceremony pictures. You didn't go out with a camera hanging from your neck, and if you did, you were bizarre, or a professional professional photographer, a professional, or an amateur photographer, or an artist, or someone else of that particular kind. So you only had a camera because you were going to some kind of ritual event, picnic, birthday, wedding, holidays, tourism, a number of those things. And I bet, it's my bet, but if you take zillions of pictures generated up to 2005, they're all like the pictures that I have in my family, paper picture of the 70s and 80s, birthday parties, postcards of the sea in which you cannot even understand the scale. Could be a rock, could be the entire Greece, it's not clear. I mean, those incredible pictures that they were inflicted on slide shows on parents. They're all the same. The The digital camera changed this somehow without any particular reason. Simply, the digital camera in the cell phone, simply because you now have a camera in your pocket at any time, but not because you wanted to have a camera in your pocket at any time. That was not the point. You have a camera in your pocket at any time because you have a cell phone in your pocket at any time. And you want to have a cell phone in your pocket at any time. So the type of pictures that are now generated are a byproduct of a particular technological change and a number of other circumstances, which make the visual culture of today quite different from the visual culture of one decade ago. So I was just taken into a shot by one of your. This is what people are doing now. They are taking visual notes for many purposes. Not because I'm particularly interested in visually, I suppose, but especially because they want to keep a memory of this particular event. And this is fine. And people are making picture of shadows, or maybe making picture of a PowerPoint presentation. This is not PowerPoint, by the way, of many type of presentations, or something which is scribbled somewhere, or a concert program, or a map. Many things are now done and make part of a visual culture, which make us somehow regret not having had this before, or having had this idea before, because we are somehow missing out a huge visual culture. We don't know how the world was 50 years back, or we know it a little bit, but not enough. We don't have enough pictures. There were some technologies which made this possible. Some of you, maybe of my age, know what this object is. A Polaroid was a system which printed out pictures immediately on the spot and was used by geologists, a number of professional figures who needed an immediate printout. And this is a typical example of a transitional technology, something which is there only because the situation is so and so. Print on demand is another transitional technology. There are many. It's an interesting subject in itself. One moral of this comes from a line or even a chapter from Jared Diamond's work on germs, gas, germs, and steel, in which he says, well, look, it is not that necessity is the mother of invention. This is hardly the case. What happens typically is that invention is the mother of necessity. Technology makes new behaviors, new ideas, new visual cultures possible. So people started taking visual notes because there is a technology. And the technology has this particular feature of being in your pocket at all time. We're going to see why invention is the mother of necessity is important in a particular setting. But this is a case, I mean, nobody had the need of producing a moving picture of beer being poured into your mouth before there was an application with an accelerometer in it, which made this possible. It is not that we invented putting the accelerometer into the iPhone in order to make this, solve this type of problem. This is not a problem. This is not part of a design space. This is a solution, which comes because there is technology. There can be better examples of this solution. This is a pen point software, which using the same technology, an accelerometer embedded in a cell phone, allows you to write in the air. And then a software translates it into writing. So it might be useful in certain circumstances, maybe not. But again, invention is the mother of necessity. Once you have a technology, you start producing new invention. And this is important because one thing that I think we should resist and we should counter is, as I said, technology has a huge power of disenchanting us, showing us that some of our practices ought to be totally changed or might be totally changed. But technology is also a source of powerful technological myths. And one myth is that, given the fact that you think that necessity is the mother of invention, you find necessities, such as a better school environment, and you produce inventions to address this particular necessity. And the result is something like this. So this is a very uninspiring classroom. And you have many classrooms like this all over the planet right now. What happened here is that people were looking at the classroom and said, oh, where can I put technology in this classroom? Well, there is a blackboard. So why don't we make a technological blackboard? And they made a whiteboard. And there is a desk. So why wouldn't we put plugs in the desk? And they put plug in the desk. And then there is a notepad. Why we don't put a screen and a keyboard? The only thing that resists electrification so far is the chair. But I think you can, at some point, decide to provide students with some kind of feedback, electric feedback. It's the next step. So here again is the simple idea that necessity is the mother of invention. You have a necessity. What is the necessity, actually, here? To make it more electric. And it is satisfied by this type of invention. So the myth is that the two myths here is that you have to think of new educational situations starting from the invention. And you do not have to consider that the high-tech end of the spectrum is the only one you should be considering. So my next point, my next take-home message is there is a lot of room for improvement at the bottom end of technology. So low-tech is a place in which there is a lot of innovation, which is simply missed out because people are investing so much energy in high-tech. High-tech is fine. I have nothing against high-tech. But there is plenty of room at the bottom. And there is a huge exploration in design space which should allow designers to make their best statements, as I'm going to show in the last part, which is coming in 3 minutes. This is an example. Water-carrying devices in areas in which you cannot or you still don't have pipes for many reasons. And there are many of those. So typically what happens in those areas is that there is a typical role for women, which is to carry water on their head because they're using their hands to do other things. And they cannot carry more than just about the water which stays in one of those jars, which means many trips, which means a lot of time, a lot of calories wasted. So the HIPAA roller comes and makes a big difference because you're just rolling this. It goes over a number of obstacles. It has a huge payload. And it is so fun that the social roles change. So men are starting to use it because they find it cool. And it is cool, actually. So a big statement, working on the low-end spectrum of technology. But low-end doesn't mean, low-tech doesn't mean really, really low-tech, as in the case of a HIPAA roller. Can also mean lower tech than something which is really high-tech. Here is my next example, which is Dr. Math. Dr. Math is a math assistant for high graders, high schoolers in mathematics and geometry, developed by this institute in Pretoria, South Africa. So this is one of the assistants who is behind Dr. Math. Okay, you want to design a software or a technological system for assisting people in geometry or in mathematics. The first thing that comes to mind is a huge, beautiful visualization, 3D moving everywhere, and calculations made right away for you by the computer, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, this is not the problem most people have. The problem most people have are of this sort. Hey, you work out the area of a triangle by using half base x perpendicular h. And this is a problem that can be a stumbling block during your mathematical career, when you start in geometry. So the system that these guys devised is the following. You have an operator who's sitting behind a computer and who's getting SMS messages with problems, only during the afternoon, not during class in the morning. So there is a cheap text messaging system in South Africa called Mixit, I think. And it's very popular. So the people behind this design, this particular educational design, decided that it was interesting to kidnap it for educational purposes. They have a tutor behind which takes this message. It is Dr. Math. And the tutor gives answers to specific problems which are related to homeworks. So there are procedures and protocols, politeness, for instance. Right, nice seeing you again. And Smarty, thanks. And how do you work out the perimeter? Dr. Math, side plus side plus side. Thank you, bye-bye. So there are two important lessons of this type of low-tech experiment. First lesson is that by using this particular technology, you optimize the tutoring situation. Well, you have a tutoring problem when you have a question and you have to make an appointment, especially for problems of this side, the area of a triangle. Oh, please come and visit me at 2 p.m. on Thursdays. There is a moment in which you really need a solution to make the next step, and it is fine if there is someone who's helping you to provide the solution. There are protocols about which kind of solution can be given, but this is a helpful solution, and it is allowed. The second point, which I find very interesting for the low-tech discussion, is that it is absolutely stunning how much mathematics can go through SMS. The whole of algebra can go through SMS. You can write almost every algebraic formula in SMS, and a huge deal of geometry as well, provided that you are able to retranscript the geometrical figures in verbal terms. But now, this is also an important point coming from cognitive science. There is an improvement in your ability to retrieve information about an assignment or geometrical information or information in general if you have an in-depth processing of information. An example of in-depth processing of information is when you, for instance, move from a figure to a geometrical description, a verbal description of a figure. So by doing this particular type of exercise of translating a figure into text and back to the figure, there is a cognitive advantage the students can capitalize on. And this is also an interesting consequence of having made a choice of going slightly lower tech. I'm going to finish my presentation by listing what I think, based on what I said so far, and on my appreciation as a philosopher with some design training. What I think are going to be interesting, by no means all, the challenges for a 21st century design. I'm going to present a mixed bag of bullet points. I put it on paper music, and I know that Goffredo would not agree on the style, but I think there is a musical aspect to it. It is a mixed bag, and overlaps are possible. So this is work in progress. Is what I would like to suggest are possible challenges, and in the end I will say why these challenges are helping understand what design is, given what I said about the normative claim aspect of design. Some of these are relatively predictable, I would say, or are already on their way, such as sustainable design, design in an environment which presents many challenges of sustainability and of limited availability of resources to a large part of the population, and probably to the totality of the population in a relatively short time. Inclusive design, design which is not supposed to mark distinction between people, but to help creating bridges between people. Low-tech design, as I mentioned, and evidence-based design, that is design that is not just throwing new ideas and new products in the market, but thoroughly testing them during the lifespan cycle of the object. So sustainable design, of course, resources are limited, and there are many ways to address many different questions. There is no simple general solution to sustainability. There are many scenarios, many environments. There is an environment in which people still use carbon, wood, for heating water because they don't have any other resource, cleaner or easy to use resource. And some designers, some socially minded designers, developed some designs of sun heaters, which cost less than 50 cents of a dollar, by just putting aluminum foil over folded cardboard, and you put the boiling pan into it, and it boils water. It actually boils water. I didn't test it yet, but it's going to be one of my next experiments. So with instructions so that you can easily circulate them, and it's an example of sustainable design. Of course, it might be low-tech design, maybe higher-tech design. I just had a glimpse of Masdar compound with new solutions for energy-saving devices, and some of them are relatively obvious, and it is incredible that they will not be used before, such as light pits. So much energy is used today to light up interiors during daytime, which is perfectly absurd. And there are many simple solutions that can reduce the consumption during daytime. At night is different, of course, but during daytime. Or in my latitudes, ventilated fireplaces, which save you a lot of energy, all the inventions like that. It's going to become an interesting subject to pull all them together, make them available, and study other cases for sustainability. Inclusive design is another type. Here I'm using the example of fashion because fashion has been for centuries designed for exclusion. So you were designing fashion to mark differences and to make sure that people got the differences that you were trying to mark. The grunge movement was something against that. People were joking in central Paris in the mid-90s that it was impossible to tell a homeless from a posh teenager at some point because they were dressed. Of course, it was parents who were making this type of comment. But it was an interesting proposal to make a design which makes everyone comfortable with their own clothes, especially if they are clothes which are not supposed to be comfortable with, homeless clothes. And to get back to the question of sleeping, there was a lot of exclusion design invested in preventing people from sleeping on benches. These are two very effective ways of preventing people from sleeping on benches. Completely round benches on which you can't even sit in some cases, or the other ones which are smaller. And you can find them in many cities because there is this sleeping taboo, and because there is the risk that some homeless is going to use the bench instead of you. Well, now there is a new trend which is developing more friendly benches, of course, but also is making steps. I mean, the homeless are a problem, and you might want to address this problem. In some cases, you have to make do with them and just mitigate the difficulty of their lives. And some designers are studying solutions such as portable things of different sort that you can that have some dignity in a sense and also can help you sleep in a comfortable way. These are an interesting case, an inflatable tent that you can plug into the heating system of a building, and then you can get shelter at night. So high-tech, low-tech, or other solutions, which you can find on the web. There are many of them. Inclusion design is also institutional design. So plainlanguage.gov, making administration accessible to most of us who do not understand forms or are tired by forms. So simplifying the language that the administration is using talking to you. This is an example of inclusion design with an institutional slant. Low-tech design. As I said, low-tech is not necessarily low tech. It can be lower tech than something else. And here is an example that I found really superb. It's a video conferencing system, which I mentioned because the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a video conferencing system is something that gives you bells and whistles and 3D and wonderful sound and immediate presence, and you want even to shake hands somehow to the person if you could. Well, it depends on what you want to do. It depends on what you want to do. Here, for instance, we had a video conferencing system which was developed in a European project, and which is not on the market, I think, yet, or has not made it to the market, in which I'm talking to Carles Sierra, a colleague in Spain, and he's giving me a tutorial about some software which I didn't understand, or some procedure I forgot now. I think it was a piece of software. So you can see here a record of our interaction, which is very useful in a tutorial. Because, well, here there is some handshaking. Then I start asking questions, and he starts giving me answers, longer answers. And then at some point, I recap, and I tell him what I understood. And he gives confirmation. So by looking at this, I know more or less when I can find the usual information about our interaction. And I can also point a colleague to that particular information. This is low-tech. It's a good design. It serves a purpose, and is easy to use. You have to implement a code for this design. For instance, there is a turn taken in conversation has to be explicit. Two people cannot talk at the same time. You have to ask and give a permission for talking. So it's a design also of a talking situation. Another batch, which I'm going to be faster. Soft-to-node design, situated design, time design, and set design. Soft-to-node design is a movement which is initiated by people in South Africa and in Northern Europe to look at specific innovation which originated in the south of the world for specific situations, and that can be easily translated into the northern part of the world. This is a USAID software, which you probably know, is a software for tracking turmoil or emergencies of different types. It was originated in Kenya for signaling places during an election in which you had a number of issues or problems or blockades. But then it is now very widely used in emergencies all over the world. It's a system that makes you crowdsource the information about an emergency. Which is what you want, basically, in an emergency. Listen to people and what they can witness. It's much easier. And there is some noise in it, but it's much easier to get this type of information sampled that way. So you can send a report to USAID, and it's used now in emergencies all over the world. Another example, which I like very much, I took part in this project, is the Wiki Africa project, in which it's a sort of reverse colonization of Wikipedia. People from South African universities are writing Wikipedia's entries on African topics, which are totally unknown to the West. So it is a way to invest Wikipedia with knowledge which is typically not available. Of course, it's a piloted project, so you have to finance people to pay them for writing the different entries. Time design, it's another interesting case because design is mostly about space and objects in space, but I would claim time is of the essence, and we have to redesign a lot of time situations. And this is a fun example of a composer, friend of mine, Simone Pappalardo, who is I don't know if you are acquainted with many contemporary music composers. They have an audience problem, which it's very hard to address. And his solution was the following. Well, I typically have an audience of 20 for a piece of 1 hour. Why don't I break it down and make a small piece of 3 minutes for 2 people? So he had this opera per 2 spettatori alla volta, the opera for 2, for an audience of 2 at a single time. People are in a line outside, they enter, they have their own opera of 3 minutes, and they're quite happy because it's engaging and they can talk to the composer. So this is a beautiful example of time redesign, but I don't know if it is generalizable, maybe. And I want to finish on this. This is super duper design. So design beyond imagination, something that is going to be resisted. And it's visionary design, and I'm just throwing it at you as one possibility is an example that interests me, and is related to writing. So in super-duper design, you really want to modify something which is hard to modify. Simple example, reforming the English spelling system or reforming the French spelling system. So there are data concerning the fact that children in English, readers in English, children or in French are 2 years late relative to the reading abilities of say, Italians. Italian is a transparent language, so the orthography is completely transparent. And so reading abilities are acquired much earlier in Italian than they are in French or in English. Dyslexia is much more hardly detected in Italy than it is in French, because the system is so easy that even a dyslexic can manage it. We should reform the orthograph. This is super-duper design. Nobody's going to accept it. But if you want to make a big design statement, this is one. Another one we should reform the numbering system and adopt the Chinese spoken numbering system. No 12 anymore. No 15 anymore. 10, 5, 1, 10, 5 is 15. As 2, 10, 5 is 25. Yes, I see that you don't like it, but the Chinese have an advantage over in mathematics because of the transparency of their spoken system. Or maybe you can start teaching Chinese to your children and then move into another system. Writing. So this is an idea which came to me from cognitive anthropologist Dan Sperber, a colleague of mine who work on communication. We invest a lot of energy in teaching our children to write, and no culture is different on this score. Now, reading is something you're not going to kill. Reading is going to stay with us for millennia. But writing, why are we investing so much energy in writing? It's not clear, because there are no clear cognitive advantages to writing. There are some studies about it, but no clear cognitive advantages, and a huge investment. And many people simply cannot write because they don't have the time to learn to write. So we have technologies which are developing, but which are quite good for transcribing what you say directly into something that someone else can read. Call it voice writing. It's no longer handwriting, not even typing. You can. I used it at some point when my children were very little and I was home with them and I needed hands. So I dictated to one of those systems, and they're quite good. You can dictate messages, and now that the smartphone is going to cost very little and is going to be massively distributed over the world, many people who did not have access to writing because they didn't have the time to learn to write, by buying a cheap cell phone, will be able to write. And now the question becomes, why the other people are still spending all that time about writing? So when you make this type of design statement, of course, tradition is going to be your major, I wouldn't say stumbling block, your major target. We did a lot in order to improve our ability to write and to make our writing recognizable. A lot of design has been invested in interfaces for writing. This is another example of transitional technology, because, of course, you don't want to have a computer that just writes. You want a computer that generates a text, a digital text. But the point why I'm mentioning writing is not only because it makes me gives me the ability to repeat my statement about the type of statement design should do as opposed to engineering, not just solving problem, but making a big statement about society or about practices. But also because it resumes some of the points that I make. Another one is the issue of inclusive design. So we have 5% of the children population is dyspraxic. So dyspraxic invest a lot of energy in trying to write with little success, simply because they cannot make their gesture automatic. So they have coordination problem, and they're as intelligent as you and me, verbally skilled. They simply have to use their attention to draw, to make drawings or making writings, and it is a useless torture to inflict writing upon them. So some of them are going to be very happy with simply using a computer, except that the school system is not prepared yet to accept this type of changes. So let me conclude on a little set of sentences. Design is, in a sense, in the process of finding itself. It is reflecting upon itself for a little time now, not a long time. And I made a proposal about what distinguishes design from engineering and what makes it close to art, showing that it is not a continuum, but these are independent dimensions. And what is specific of design, the specific dimension of design is that when you design something, you're not just solving a problem, or you're not just adding a soul to your solution. You're making a normative claim, a normative statement. You're showing people how they should sit, how they should fill in a form for organ donation, how society is going to be if they could just give up writing. Challenges. Presenting challenges for the future is a sort of a lazy way for me to contribute to the philosophy of design. But in a sense, challenges are also a way to think about design. So in understanding what the future is going to be or could be, we can also understand the past of design. Because by redefining what design is, we're going to find practices in the past which would fit our new description of design. And maybe we could find solutions there which, given my particular interest for low tech, are probably buried in the past and simply invisible because we don't have the tools for seeing them. I think to proceed in this philosophical exploration of design, we have to look for yet more challenges. And as always, when challenges are to be looked for, the thing that is most needed is courage. Thank you very much.
I'm having a hard time understanding that. Automatically, if I design a chair, I'm automatically making a normative statement that it's a better chair? Or couldn't I just design a chair that I want to see that I haven't seen?
Exactly. No, this is the point.
Saying it's better?
No, there is an intentional element here. If you want to make a statement, then, if you make that statement, then you're going to be a designer, according to this classification. But you can have a variety of positions here. You can have, a default position according to which you're making a statement anyway. The statement is, keep on sitting on those type of chairs. And why not? At this point, it's a matter of fine-tuning about the ambition of the statement that you're making. I would say great design, because one point of this exercise is also to give us some coordinates to evaluate design. We're always making evaluations about whether this is a good design product or not. Good design, if design conforms to that particular idea that you have to make a certain type of normative claim, is evaluated according to the ambition of the claim and to other parameters such as goodness, societal issues. You're making design if you're putting called barbed wire around the property. It's a design statement about how you should live.
When you mentioned how invention actually breeds a necessity that we start to use things we may not need, that brought to my mind the famous Apple Steve Jobs phenomenon we just went through. And there was some discussion that it was overrated, it was a cult, and that another person who died around the same time who had invented a medical device that saved many lives was never mentioned. So there might be this idea that the narrative statements and the kind of big ego, flashy statement is a little bit too much on vogue, and it's getting out, you know, a little bit overrated. And what do you think about this idea?
Well, I don't know if I should try to be diplomatic about that, but the Steve Jobs issue in general, it's a complicated issue, I would say. Let me give you one line. It's a possible line. I'm not sure I'm going to endorse it, but it's a line which is contained in the Jaron Lanier statement, which was in the handout. I don't know if you got the handout. Well, there was a point. I read it out because someone else had for the benefit of the coordination. In Silicon Valley companies, we find rooms full of MIT PhD engineers not seeking cancer cures or sources of safe drinking water in the developed world, but schemes to send little digital pictures of teddy bears and dragons between adult members of a social network. These designs came together very recently, and there is a haphazard, accidental quality to them. Resist the easy grooves they're guiding you into. If you love a medium made of software, there is a danger that you will become entrapped in someone else's recent careless thoughts. Struggle against that. So this is one line. The line is, let's consider, okay, it's fantastic. We have those iPads. And, well, I can make it more specific if you want. Consider what happened to the ebook. I made a prediction many years back that the ebook would never take off. And many other people were making the same prediction for different reasons. So people like Umberto Eco said, well, if my book falls down to the ground, it doesn't break. You don't need to recharge it. The standard book has this type of life. I made a different prediction based on the ecosystem in which you circulate books. One ecosystem is the ecosystem of presents. It's very nice to receive a book as a present. It's not so nice to receive a PDF or whichever. You don't impress me. You might impress me if you give me the physical device, but you might impress me the first time, not the second time. I mean, feel free, give me as many as you want. But the ecosystem changes, and it is not easily replaceable. The book ecosystem is not easily replaceable. There is a third type of dimension here, which is the important cognitive advantage of a book relative to other devices, which is when you have a book, it's you and the book. And there is no key that you push here to send a dragon picture to some other friends in a social network scheme. And there is no key to press, icon to press to get a Sudoku, or no icon to press to get a movie, and so on and so forth. So it was an interesting ecosystem for attention because it forced you to be with the book and no one else, with the author and no one else. And the author produces books thinking of this particular ecosystem in which the reader is going to be with him or her all the time. The iPad comes. It's the same thing as the camera in the cell phone. Now people are going to download ebooks simply because they have an iPad, which they don't buy because they want to read ebooks, but because they buy for many other reasons, or because the parents give them to them, or whichever. And they're so fun, a wonderful object. I mean, this is a total design object in a specific sense. It's an object in which your attention is continuously stimulated and challenged. Now the ebook is going to be downloaded on the iPad, and people are downloading ebooks on the iPad. They're doing it more than they're downloading ebooks on Kindle and other devices, which are book-only devices. And they're going to download more ebooks than buy books. Books are going to be changed because of this, because now the author has to write not for a reader who's supposed to spend time with him or her for hours or days. but for a reader whose attention is being challenged by movies and whichever. So this is, I think, the idea behind some of the criticisms of Lanier to design in the digital age. Most of the design in the digital age, by necessity, is going to be design that, because of the technological change and because of the things which are available, so the convergence of different technologies, is going design based on the necessity to compete for attention. It's going to be a huge competition for the Graal of attention, of which we know one single thing. We don't know much about attention, but William James said the only thing we know that it is very scarce. Whatever it is, there is very little of it. I can see other possibilities here. I'm partly answering your question, but I think you can see where I come from at least. There is a lot of space. I could add another item to my list of design meant to protect attention. There is little done in that. Most of advertising, of course, is about attracting attention and manipulating our attention, keeping you there for a little while, enough to distract you from other things, enough for the message to go through. It's not clear what design for protecting attention is going to be. Institutions are interesting, like the traditional school system. Traditional school system is now a place in which attention is institutionally protected, in the sense that you cannot zap during the class hours. You should not send emails and things like that. At least there are some rules that you can agree upon. There is a cutting-edge advantage of a traditional institutional system for schooling, for this attention protection issue. And it is somehow surprising that we are embracing so fast technologies which are supposed to do exactly the opposite, put the teacher in competition for attention attraction with things which have been designed by Steve Jobs and his team of geniuses, PhD geniuses, which are simply irresistible. So I don't know if this answered, but I have a stance which is mildly critical. I can see, I said, invention is the matter of necessity, but the point is we shouldn't stop to send it teddy bears pictures or finding schemes for that. We should, in this particular new environment, look for interesting and creative solution for which attention is one of the main treasures.
It seems to me that status and design have become very intermingled. I mean, if we go back to the beginning, we look at artists and engineers were all on the same level. And people like Seurat actually went to the Gobelins factory to get advice on colours for their painting. And it wasn't until the division of labour that we actually started to separate artists, designers, engineers. The constructivists argued that artist engineers were crucial to the process. But what you're just talking about then really strikes me that it's almost like we need to have a division between status design and design for function or design for purpose. I'd be interested to hear your opinion on that.
So the question is about, because I didn't get to all the, acoustically
yeah,
was
design seems to be more about status these days. We have an iPad, I own an iPad.
Yeah. Well, I think people enjoy iPads very much. It's very hard to take the iPads off their hands. Status is important, of course, and the reason why people got an iPad in the first place is marketing or whatever. The point is the iPad is there, and it is such an incredible object. I admire it a lot. If I use that particular type of normativity, is an object which is, well, if you want really a punchline here, the iPad is the first computer, which is not simply a game computer, which shows that you can make a computer for consumption only. You can do some production on an iPad, but it is not as efficient as you can do on other types of. Even I have a tablet here, for instance, which I'm using for many years now, and it has an advantage over the iPad, which makes me not switch. I use an electronic pen on it, so I don't use my finger, I don't have multi-touch, I can control what happens. And it has killer applications like a PDF annotator, which makes me happy when I interact with students and colleagues and things like that. Now, again, the iPad, no matter how it entered your bag, it is there. And now you have to compete with it if you want to, or you have to struggle with it if you want to do other activities. Because it is such an incredibly good designed product that it simply makes you go around and download apps and play with new apps. And there are fantastic apps, and some of them are really genius apps. So there is one which I like very much, is the Star Walk thing that makes you recognize constellations by using the accelerometer and your position. Things that you couldn't do before or were very difficult to do before. So there are really beautiful things there. But the problem is the ecosystem in which all this is packed, which is an ecosystem which makes you totally addicted to the zapping procedure. So did that answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. We haven't had here in NYU many presentations from Europe. So it's nice. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. We haven't had here in NYU many presentations from Europe. So it's nice to hear a presentation in Italian English with a French accent on philosophy.
Great compliment.
It is a compliment, monsieur.
No,
and then you come from CNRS. You come from a French institute.
Yeah.
In all this openness of new technologies and new ideas, that's not very French. That's more, you know, American, British. Can you explain why you are in France?
Oh.
I love France. I'm half French, but I'm just.
I love France. No, it's.
Just make it very short. I've just been told that this is going to be the last question.
Okay, so we get the last answer. I'm there because of life took me there. And I enjoy a certain freedom of movement for my research. So you probably see the series of strange publications that I have on holes and shadows. So every 5 years, I start a new thing, more or less, and then those things tend to go on, and CNRS allows me to do this.
So is the environment in France more apt for this kind of life that you're living?
I don't know. It was good for me. So I am happy with it. As Goffredo said, I work with the Ministry of Research and Innovation, of Research and working in the Innovation Director, and we are trying to go through some environmental elements of the French system, which should be changed, or maybe it's a complex environment. It has a big inertia. And it's very hard to move things in an environment with such a big inertia. So you have to be careful and make the right adjustment. There is a lot going on. And I think, I don't know if this answer is half personal statement.
I think I will just take the authority that has just been given to the speakers in English, Italian with French accent, which I'm kind of a master in the area, to say thank you very much, Roberto, for this fantastic lecture.
Thank you.